Good morning. Happy Sabbath. It's good to see so many of you here today. I know it's just because you were cold at home and you knew we had heaters here that were full, but actually we thought, well, if there's a whole bunch of people here, we'll warm it up. So you have helped warm up the sanctuary. This morning, before I begin my sermon, though, we want to take a moment and honor our veterans, which there are a number of that are part of our church here. I'm going to read off some names and where they served of men that are not here today first, and then we'll talk about the ones that are here today. We have some pictures of them as well. But Gene Lombardo, which many of you know, he served in the Air Force. We didn't get the exact dates on him, but I believe we were talking, I think the right age would be around the Korean War, but the exact dates, I don't know. I know he served for a long time, though, and has lots of stories and lots of pictures. We've gone over and talked to him. Jerry Emerson, he served in the Coast Guard during the Korean War. He just moved out of the area. Jerome French, which we've had come to church here before, he served in the Army in Afghanistan, and I know he was deployed a couple of times. Dave Abbott served in the Army in the Vietnam era, the Vietnam War. Brian Riggs, who we know, who moved away from here just a few years ago, he served in the Army in Vietnam. Dale Schoplin, is that how you say that? Shefflin, I knew I'd get that wrong. He served in the Army in Vietnam as well. And then Gary Segbart, who's Alan's brother, served in the Army in the Vietnam War. So a lot of Vietnam veterans, which is awesome. We're grateful for all that you have done. Now we have a few that are here and come to church regularly that are here today. And just to embarrass them a little bit, we have some photos of them back from when they served. So I'm not sure who's the first one. Okay. All right. So we have one of our great founders of this church on the far right. Guesses? Who's that? You don't know? Well, it's kind of embarrassing. This is Alan Segbart on the far right with his brothers, and they served in Vietnam. And Alan's going to come up here in just a minute and tell you a little bit more about what he did in the military as a conscientious objector. I remember my grandfather, who passed away a few years ago, was drafted into the Korean War, and he was a medic. And he is the most unmedical person you could ever meet, my grandfather. He used to tell us all kinds of stories about giving atropine syrettes. Does that sound familiar, Alan, and many of you? I don't. It's amusing to me how even non-medical people, but you guys did an amazing work over there. So Alan served in Vietnam. That's that first picture. Then we have any guesses on this one? This is the Korean War era. Does that help you pinpoint the gentleman in our congregation? He's here today. Norm Metzger. This is Norm. And Norm served, he was actually in Germany, that's right, during the Korean War. And he had a number of relatives, and they didn't want you to all go to the same place. And so he was stationed in Germany during that time frame. And I love these pictures. It's great to see you guys when you were younger. It's amazing to think how many people, men and women, have spent years serving this country. That's pretty awesome to have so many people that are dedicated to this country. So it's neat to be able to honor you. It's only one day. We really should be honoring you every day with our freedom. So we thank you for that. This one you should be able to pinpoint who that is, right? David Smith. So David served in the Navy from 1999 to 2008. Is that right? Okay, good. And I know he was all over the world for a lot of that time, traveling and living in other countries. You know, it's interesting, as you serve this country, you get to live in other ones. Not interesting how most of the time, if men or women are in the military service, they end up moving to other countries and serving this country there. It's a sacrifice to have to live somewhere else and honor this country. So we're thankful for his many years of service in the Navy. Here's another one. It's a little grainy, but this one, hopefully you can figure out who that is. Tom Matthews. So Tom Matthews was in the Marines, and he was in Iraq and Japan. What years, Tom? Army. Oh, Army and Navy. Well, I got my list. I won't tell you from who. In the Army. Okay. So Army, Navy, my bad. So sorry. And then, wow. So how many years in combination? 12, around 12. Wow. You know, Marshall and I've only been married for 12 years. That's a long chunk of time. So I know many of you have served for a long, that came out wrong, didn't it? Trying to give an equation to a modern day example. Good thing Marshall's not here. Well, we thank you, Tom, for serving. And I don't have a picture of Dennis Matthews, but I believe this is him right up here on the piano. And Dennis Matthews served in the Army during Vietnam as well. And do you want me to explain what these are, Alan, or are you going to do that? Can you come up here? Well, we're going to invite Alan up, and he's going to share a little bit about what military service looked like for these guys and a little bit about some of these things that are here today in the sanctuary.
So you're seeing some beautiful blankets here. And we would like to invite you after the service to come walk around, look at each one. There's also some other memorabilia that are at these stations also. So the ladies of the church, mostly Patrice and Nancy Matthews, made these blankets a few years back for all the veterans here at the Moscow church. And then there was a list of those that aren't here that Natashia already read that have blankets also, people who have moved away or passed away, whatever. And so anyway, we just wanted to share those with you. You know, when Veterans Day falls on a Sabbath, it's just kind of special to me, having been drafted and served a little bit myself. You know, United States of America has been such a blessing to the whole world. And I believe that's because we have stood up for the basic principle of God, and that is total freedom. Freedom and peace is what the United States stands for. So when you're in the military, that's really what you're doing. You're trying to ensure that we can continue to have a lifestyle in a country that's as peaceful and free as possible. That freedom at some times kind of bumps heads with the military. It's not always been easy for you to serve if you have a conscientious objection. And that objection for most people that are Seventh-day Adventists that have served in the military is that we choose not to bear arms, but we choose to serve our country regardless of the danger. Even if you're a medic on the front lines, you're not armed, because it has been the goal of Seventh-day Adventist Christians to help and serve where they could. So most people that are Seventh-day Adventist and are in the military and were drafted into the military became medics. That was a very interesting road to walk for myself and many others. In our foyer, there's a little flyer, this little tiny book here, The Faith of Desmond Doss. Desmond Doss was a Seventh-day Adventist who broke the way for many of us after he served, as he insisted on following God's laws and God's way of life in the military. The military didn't want to let him have Sabbath observance, or they didn't want him to be a military person without carrying a firearm, but he refused, and he kind of set the tone for, especially Seventh-day Adventists were kind of at the forefront of conscientious objection in that way. And so many of us that were Seventh-day Adventists, even back Norm's age Yvonne's father's age were conscientious objectors and did not carry firearms in the military, but carried medical kits or worked in hospitals and served in that way. We Seventh-day Adventists have always had a strong belief in supporting our country. There are other conscientious objectors who refuse to be a part of the military at all, but that hasn't been what Seventh-day Adventists have decided to do. So a similar road that many of us walked as Seventh-day Adventists was we went to Fort Sam Houston and became medics. At Fort Sam Houston, there was the opportunity to volunteer for another program that many of you have heard about. It was called White Coats. And that was a program where we could volunteer to assist the Army in research and development of medical ways to, I'm trying to think exactly how to put this, but deal with almost every disease that's known in the world. And in Frederick, Maryland is where that institution is. And there's so much research that's gone on there. Many, many doctors worked there and worked in research in various different areas of disease. So some of us got to volunteer for that. Dennis Matthews was one that was in that program. I was the person that was in that program. And I know many of you know other people that were in that program also. And the reason I mention that is because the Army specifically took almost entirely Seventh-day Adventists into that program. And the reason for that has to do with Natasha's sermon today. There was a very constant standard, you might say, of lifestyle and of health. And so that gave them a very good control group as they were doing research on the different diseases in the world. Anyway, we'll let Natashia bring us some more information about lifestyles.